had mentioned the data and the data centricity, and that was this interesting thing. How do you view, and you have, as you mentioned, this phenomenal focus of using data on digital. How do you see the data being applied? And I know we just had a phenomenal conversation with Kristen talking about how data is being used at the Cablevision footprint. How do you look at data being applied to TV in general? And I know the word programmatic comes up. I've heard you use the word systemic before to actually refer to that. So I'm trying to be as incredibly semantically friendly as possible to the audience here. I'm okay with either word. But the idea is, you know, how do you see what the work that's happened in digital going into TV, and what is it going to take to make that happen? If you could throw some ideas, that'd be great.
I think some of it has already happened, right? What's been missing in TV for all this time is granularity, right? But to me, systemic and programmatic are pretty much the same thing, right? I don't quote Marissa Myers very often, but she's the one who said the opposite of programmatic is manual, right? When you're dealing with a granularity of data that is as deep as what we have now, it's humanly impossible to process, right? I mean, just think, in 1996, we finally got Nielsen to agree to give us respondent level data, right? Up until then, television data was only available aggregated at the program level, and in 96, 97, we began to get it one respondent at a time. Well, that allowed us to do reach and frequency optimization for the first time, right? I don't remember the panel count back then, but I'm pretty sure it was just around 20,000.
Right.
And there was no way that human beings could do that kind of analysis.
With just
right?
20,000.
With 20,000, right? So we went 100% systemic for reach and frequency optimization. And all of our channel selection and day part selection moved to that kind of a systemic approach. Well, today we're dealing with tens of millions of respondents, and our profile count today, our persistent profile count, is over 200 million in the US alone.
Thank goodness for computers.
Well, you couldn't do it any other way, right? So
that's the need.
But I think the good news is, you know, you and I have talked over the years about data silos in our business.
Yes.
And we've talked about discipline silos, right? The TV people kind of are in one silo, and the digital people are in another silo, and planners are yet in another silo, and business science sits by itself somewhere else. Well, for the first time, we really see a light at the end of this tunnel, because you don't break down silos by forcing integration on people, in my view, because that is the absolute fastest way to lose all specialisms and to lose all discipline, because nobody knows what their job is anymore, and there is a reason that specialist capabilities exist, and if you want to be best in class, you have to have specialists. I think the fascinating role of data going forward is that once we stop using different sources of data, right? I mean, in the past, you used Nielsen TV data for TV, you used print data for print, you used econometric granular data for to look for correlations and regression analytics, right? It was completely different data sets, and everybody spoke different languages. We're moving very, very rapidly to a world where the data silos get conjoined, and that conjoinment creates real opportunities for integration in work process without losing any of the specialisms that exist in our organization.
Got it.
And I think it'll serve the industry really well.
So let's all work together holistically, but not throw out the expertise that we have within these, because expertise matters, but we need to connect them appropriately so we can manage and sequence across them in the most effective way.
Yeah, because every time I've seen organizations try to integrate by breaking down the specialisms, you throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
And you don't end up with nearly as good a solution as you would hope for.
Right.
Great comments, okay. You know, it's interesting, we're talking about the silos we said, and what we found is that over time, we've actually broken down the silos with data. And the question of convergence is not just, is it a media piece, but how do we break down data? We talked about that. There's multiple data sets. How do we break it down across media, TV, print, radio, so forth and so on? How do we break it out across time? How do we manage converged and holistic planning when you have upfront, scatter, spot, RTB marketplaces? And then, of course, we have all these multiple screens and devices that are out there. So how do we go do and handle all that? And then lastly, I would argue you have technologies. We have biddable technologies, scheduling technologies, serving technologies. So all of that is convergence. And what's happening, we use this term silos historically to refer to the media stuff. And I would argue that the walled gardens are a media silo. They're compiling data, technology, and content in one piece. And I think there's a tremendous amount of value to be had from those walled gardens. The bigger challenge is it's a little bit of a step in the backward direction in that we can't bring the data across those silos into holistic plans. So what I would love to have happen, well, I think the walled gardens are tremendous assets for us as consumers, is that if we could bring it all together so that it's not just, in order to do this, I have to be in their specific world or this specific world, but can I plan holistically and use the data
Well, the
across
consumer
all of
doesn't
it?
know they live in 4 separate walled gardens, right?
They don't know, although it was interesting, and I was curious, AOL was the first, arguably speaking, walled garden. I'm going back sometime, if the late 90s when they were the dominant ISP.
I'm too young to remember.
Yes, you are.
You don't all have to laugh at
Yes,
the
you
same
are.
time.
And they were tremendous. Everyone went there. They were the biggest as a content provider and a distributor. They were great. And then all of a sudden, the open internet got to the point where it actually was so alluring that AOL lost its foothold. So it's kind of interesting. I'm not saying that that'll happen with the existing walled gardens, but it'll be kind of interesting. In order to be an effective walled garden, you really have to be everything to everybody. And that's a difficult thing to do just in general. So the idea from a consumer point of view is that if the walled garden, if there's other opportunities outside of it, like there was at the AOL example I gave, then they will flee the walled garden and see that there's something they should do. Right now, though, I don't think consumers see that difference today with how they operate, but I think that's the risk to the walled garden going forward.
RTB in television, ever going to happen?
For a piece of inventory that has excess supply, or if you're a monopolist, you could take advantage of a second-priced auction. The thing about TV, though, is that it's a scarce medium with content owners and premium content, which matters.
Not much distress inventory.
It's not much distressed inventory. So there could be a place for it. I'm not saying there won't be, but if you look at what's happened, like say in social display, if that makes sense, there's arguably a tonnage of inventory.
Right.
There's excess. It makes sense to have an auction.
Well, because of the monopolistic characteristics.
And the monopolistic characteristics, too.
And you need real-time ad serving, which kind of takes linear TV out of the equation for the moment, right?
Now, real-time ad serving, real-time bidding, there's advantages to both, but they are different, as we know. So real-time ad serving, in the case of what Kristen was talking about, we want the ability to know that I'm making this up, Scott Ferber, on that footprint, and hence I should show this ad at this moment. That's real-time ad serving. That's not real-time bidding. So we think that the idea of real-time ad serving will be very prevalent in television. There are several companies here who are really good at that and are developing the capabilities and further. But real-time bidding is the question we have. How about you? What do you think about with DAI coming out? And you mentioned this with all the video on demand streams growing.
DAI could, in fact, go to an RTB, right?
Yes.
Because the ad serving isn't an issue, right?
Right there.
But linear TV, not so much.
Got it. Final words. I'm going to ask this to you, Erwin, if you don't mind, if it's final words. What do you think, looking backwards, I know it's only mid-November, what was the biggest thing or some of the big things you saw in 2015? Surprised you?
Nothing surprises me anymore. I'm too old. I think the Comcast Time Warner merger coming apart surprised me. When it was announced, everybody assumed it would just happen. Right. And, you know, if you think about it, the DirecTV AT&T acquisition went through, but the Comcast Time Warner one didn't. But I think, other than that, the stuff that surprises me on an ongoing basis is how resistant the legacy players in our business continue to be to change that ultimately, in my view, is going to be really good for them.
Very interesting. Great. For me, just to end it, I couldn't believe $26 billion plus went up for review all in a very short period of time.
They did?
I just was shocked. I know you haven't been busy, I'm sure. I thought that was an interesting watershed moment. Just something as an outsider when you're coming in 2014 looking in, you don't expect all of a sudden a whole bunch of marketers to do it. So that was a big shock for me.
Yeah, I think.
And I agree.
Yeah. Very, very, very destabilizing to the business. I think a function of the fact that accountability, pricing pressures, all those things are out there. I also think that a lot of people make commitments. They overpromise, underdeliver, and that's not a good way to maintain a long-term client relationship. By the way, I think there are some clients who have been complicit in that because they take the savings to the bottom line and don't care what the long-term effects on the brands are.
It's such a shame because, as you know, you get what you pay for, and if you minimize cost, you will eventually reduce yourself. You have to put in an investment and get a return on investment.
You know,
so I'm hoping that procurement will look at these things differently and say, if I pay a little bit more for quality, I might actually get a better outcome, because isn't the real result cost per outcome or desired outcome as opposed to just cost?
It's more than that. I mean, we talked earlier about the role of media in creating awareness,
yes.
Right? Creating awareness and mitigating decay, right? So one easy way for us to save money for a client
it's just to get rid of awareness,
is
right?
to reduce the awareness
Right.
side, right? The short-term results are the same,
Right.
but what happens
I'm
long-term...
not buying Mercedes or whatever, Lexus or
Well,
any of those.
what happens long-term is the brand loses market share. And buying back that market share costs a multiple of what you saved in the initial go-around.
I was going to say, because by the time I'm 40 and I have the ability to do it, I'm not buying that car. That's a pretty expensive place for that marketer or brand to be in.
Indeed it is.
Okay. Thank you. With that,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.